Rose Kennedy got up that morning, and as she did every morning, it was a Friday, as probably most people remember. It was a beautiful day for her to go to Mass. She went to early Mass every day. It was, she said, a crystal clear blue sky day, a golden day at Hyannisport on Cape Cod. And she had not yet gone, she had gone to Mass, she'd come home and had lunch with her husband, who by this time, and we haven't even talked about this tragedy, her husband was struck by an incapacitating stroke in December of 1961 and was really unable to speak intelligibly from then on, but lived until 1969. So she would typically have lunch with him. They would sometimes take a drive. So they took a drive around Cape Cod, and then, of course, after lunch, she got the word from Bobby. The Attorney General, her son, called her to say Jack had been shot at a motorcade in Dallas. They weren't sure exactly the extent of the wound. Bobby called again to say it did not look good for Jack. Rose went out on the beach. She did what she always did in times of sorrow and tragedy. She retreated to be by herself. She couldn't really talk to her husband because he could not converse with her. And she and her husband had this plan through their whole lives, all of their married lives. They would not tell each other bad news. They would try, if they were apart from each other and there was bad news, they didn't want to worry the other. If something could be held over to the next day, they would say, let's try to give the other a good night's rest. So Rose did not tell Joe what had happened. And then she got the call from Bobby that Jack was gone. And she retreated to her room, and she paced around, and she put things in order, and she said the rosary. But what kept coming back to her was why. And even Rose, who was convinced she would see Jack in the afterlife, but even she couldn't understand. And she would later say, going back to this concept of Republican motherhood, I spent years raising these children to be educated and to be well-trained and to be perfect and to serve their country. And in one fell swoop, it was gone. Even she questioned God. She could not understand it. But then she would say, I would just say God knew better than I, and I would have to accept his will. And so soon she was off to Washington to go to the funeral of her son.
Well, but that day she takes another phone call from Lyndon Johnson, and she calls him Mr. President.
She does. She takes this phone call from the president, the new president.
30 minutes.
30 minutes after he's been sworn in. He's on Air Force One. He's coming back from Dallas with the remains of her son in the cabin. And Rose is completely poised. We have that recording here at the Miller Center, and people can go on www.millercenter.org and type in Rose Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, and they can listen to Lyndon Johnson conversing with Rose Kennedy. And she says to him when he comes on the line, Mr. President, it is Rose, the poised wife of the diplomat. Even though she's just suffered yet another and maybe the worst tragedy she ever suffered, she is completely poised and compos mentis in talking to the president. And then Lady Bird gets on the line, and it's Lady Bird whose voice is breaking with pain and sorrow for Rose. And Rose is completely poised and completely at ease with herself in talking to the new president. Then she's off to the funeral. You do not see Rose breaking down in tears in public. She looks utterly devastated, of course, at St. Matthew's Cathedral and at Arlington Cemetery. And yet she flies back that night to the compound to be utterly alone because, again, her husband cannot speak with her. She can't even share this emotion and this tragedy with him.